Welcome to Talkin' Transit, and I'm Subwaymark, New York City subways. That's a large topic to discuss. But here, I'm not here to talk about the city subways in detail. I'm here to tell you that it is my most favorite subway system, metro system in the world. That despite all the problems it may have. And I'm going to tell you why, just in a moment. Welcome back. The purpose of Talkin' Transit is to provide and share my experiences and insight from riding transit systems, visiting railway museums, and riding passenger trains from around the world. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do it now while you're here. And while you're at it, hit that notification bell so you know anytime a new video hits the feed. So, the New York City subway. Why is it my favorite? Well, there's a lot of history on there. But let me tell you a little bit what the New York City subway is not. It's not the oldest subway in the world. That would be London, which opened in 1863. It's not even the oldest system in the United States. That would be Boston. It's not even the longest metro system or most ridden metro system in the world. That would be Shanghai, China. It doesn't even have the most ornate stations in the world. I leave that to Stockholm, which is known to have the world's longest art museum. Basically, almost every station is a piece of art. We all know that New York City subway is definitely not the cleanest in the world. Matter of fact, it may be one of the dirtiest. It is also not a cheap system to build. Matter of fact, it's very expensive. That is probably why it's been taking decades to get the 2nd Avenue subway, even its small portion, open, let alone its full length that it may eventually see. Not sure if it'll be in my lifetime. It is also not the easiest system to get around, especially for visitors from around the world, with all the different lines and the fact that some lines share tracks with other lines, and the fact that the lines can even change. So, what does the New York City subway have that others don't? Well, it has the most number of stations in the world at 472, and is one of the very few that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. How many cities can name has that kind of service? It also has a multitude of services. Has express services and local services. It has interlining, so less chances of transfers depending on where you are. It has 4-track right-of-ways and 3-track right-of-ways for the express services. And with all the interlining of service, it allows trains to get around disruptions in service or construction. It may lead to some confusion, but at least the trains keep on running. So why is New York my favorite subway system in the world? Well, I'll have to confess, I'm from Brooklyn originally. The first subway I ever rode was the New York City subway. However, I have been to other metro systems around the world. 47 different systems I've ridden on. So I can honestly say I've had experiences at other systems, but New York is my favorite. As I said, I grew up in Brooklyn. It was only about a 10-minute walk to the Avenue I stop on the F line, as well as the 18th Avenue stop. We're also about a 20-minute walk to the 18th Avenue stop on the N line. However, we never used that line because the F line was so much closer. So my dad went to work every day via the subway. So he'd walk to the Avenue I or the 18th Avenue stop, hop on the F train, go to downtown Brooklyn, transfer at J Street Borough Hall, which is now called J Street Metrotech, to the A train, and then take the A train to Broadway Nassau in Lower Manhattan, now called Fulton Street. Now, back in the early 70s when we lived there, the F line had local and express service in peak direction. Avenue I was a local stop, but 18th Avenue was the express. That's why he would choose between the two at times. It was more likely coming home that he might get off at 18th Avenue if he was on the express and just walk from there. Normally, he would probably be on the local and get off at Avenue I. Now, one thing I do remember, my mom would be pretty smart. The supermarket we would typically go to was Key Foods on McDonald Avenue, right by the Avenue I stop. She would time it so we would go shopping and we would be done about the time my dad was expected to get off the subway and come down the stairs to the street. Keep in mind that Avenue I stop was an elevated train. I do remember several times me and my sister would be there waiting, looking up the stairs every time a train would come in, and looking to see if we could see Dad coming down before he got through the head house to come through the turnstiles and come downstairs. Now, this was also the era of the R1 through 9s trains running, and They were pretty dirty at the time. So they're usually brown, but they look chalky brown from all the dust. So my sister and I would call them, oh look, it's the chocolate milk trains. Anyway, there was an ulterior motive, because if my dad came downstairs and my mom had a bunch of groceries in a cart, guess who had to help bring it home and then help get up the stairs, because we lived on the 3rd floor in an apartment building and there were no elevators. Also, sometimes we would meet him at the station because there was a pizza place right there at Avenue I called Toto's Pizza, and we would pick up pizza to bring it home. Or if my dad was preferring Chinese, he would get off at 18th Avenue because there was a Chinese restaurant that he liked that was just by that station. We would also hop on the F train to go to Coney Island. It was only about 15-20 minutes by train to get to Coney Island. We would also take the subway to downtown Brooklyn to go shopping, particularly at Christmas time to go to A&S. A&S was a department store in downtown Brooklyn, and they were famous for their Santaland and toy department, and so we loved going there at Christmas time. We would also take the subway to see my dad's sister, who lived up in Inwood, actually near where my dad grew up. Matter of fact, pretty much on the same block that my dad grew up. We took the subway to go to Mets games a couple of times. We'd have to go into Manhattan and then get on the number 7 to go out to Shea Stadium at the time to get there, but that's what we did. We also saw a Rangers game at Madison Square Garden one time. Again, we took the subway. We didn't have a car growing up, except for my dad would rent a car maybe to go out to the Poconos. Other than that, you didn't need a car in New York City. You can get anywhere, even today, by subway. We moved out of the city when I was about 13 years old to Nyack, New York, just above the city, right by what the Tappan Zee Bridge is today, across the Hudson River. But just because I left the city doesn't mean I never rode the subway again. As a matter of fact, for college, I went to Manhattan College, which was obviously in the Bronx. Manhattan College is right at the tip of the number 1 line. Manhattan College has 2 campuses. The main campus, up on the hill, basically just above the 242nd Street Van Cortlandt Park terminal of the number 1. And then the engineering campus, which was down the hill, closer to Broadway, right by the 238th Street stop. And between the two was a pathway and a parking lot to get between the 2 campuses. That pathway overlooked the 240th Street shops for the number 1 line. So I would get to see the subway trains sitting out in the yards right next to their shops. I got to see the transition from the older subway cars to, then new, the R62s. This was all right in the mid-1980s. And sometimes if I had enough time between classes and I was stressed, I would hop on the subway and just go riding around to clear my head. So you can see that I have a lot of memories of the New York City subway, and I still love it today. Now I can say the New York City subway is not the cleanest, it's not even the safest one in the world. And you have to remember, in the 1970s and 80s, the New York City subway was going through its worst. Between the graffiti and the crime, and you never wanted to be on the subway around 3 o'clock when the schools got out. That's when the crime really spiked, until the regular commuters started getting on the trains around 4:30. I did see the subway start improving in the late 1980s. Newer cars were coming in, they started cleaning up the stations, getting rid of the graffiti. This was all important to return New York City subway to the grandeur it used to be. One of the improvements of the subway was new cars. Unfortunately, one of my favorite things that I used to love to do in the subway is no longer possible. That is going up to the front of the train and looking out the front window. Up until basically the 1990s, all subway cars had the motorman's compartment in a small little booth on the side of the car, and then a door so you could go between cars with a big window in it. That was the railfan window, and we enjoyed it. All newer subway cars now have full-width cabs, and just 18 months ago they retired the last of the old cars with the small booth type motorman's cab. That was the R32s. So there is no longer railfan window possible on any of the newer cars unless they're running a museum train. In this post-pandemic world, I have seen the New York City subway slide back towards the 1980s between crime, homelessness, and graffiti are all back in the subways. But I don't think it's nearly back as bad as the 1980s. Of course, this is not unique to New York. A lot of the transit systems around the United States have seen the same problem. I was recently in LA, that was a video on my channel, where I've seen LA, I think is actually worse than New York City. Thank goodness from the recent video accounts I'm seeing from LA, they are stepping up their crime enforcement on the subways. So I expect LA to return, and I see it no different than New York. So why is New York my favorite? Well, obviously it's from my childhood memories, my teenage memories, my college memories. It'll always be dear to my heart. I know the New York City subway like the back of my hand. I can give people directions on the subway without consulting a map, unless it's to a destination I've never been to before. Probably other reasons why I like the New York City subway is the frequency of service, the vibrancy, the locals and express trains. There's always trains moving in New York City. So what do you think of the New York City subway? What is your favorite metro system of the world? I'd like to know. Please leave it in the comments below. I hope you like this version of Talkin' Transit. If you did, please hit that like button. And please consider subscribing to the channel and hit that notification bell so you'll be notified anytime a new video hits the feed. So, until next time, please watch the closing doors, and I'll see you at the next station. Bye now.